Hey there, beautiful souls. I'm Colleen Lockoff.
And I'm Meredy Lockoff.
And welcome to Spiritual Sisters with Sass, the podcast where two sisters with a passion for spirituality and a touch of sass come together to explore the exciting world of self-improvement.
That's right, Colleen. We embarked on this incredible journey together, diving into different self-improvement techniques, yoga practices, and a whole array of life experiences.
Yeah, and through it all, we've managed to create lives that are abundant, happy, and constantly evolving. It's been a wild ride, hasn't it, Meredy?
You bet, sis. We've got two very different perspectives on life, but that's what makes this podcast so special. I'm all about diving in head first into life's adventures and embracing every challenge with a bit of sass. While Colleen here, she's got her own unique approach.
Yep, that's me. And I'm all about the yoga, mindfulness, and finding my zen. And together we make the perfect balance.
So whether you're looking for some wisdom, a few laughs, or just some heartfelt stories, you're in the right place. We're here to share our personal experiences and insights with you, all while exploring the wild and diverse world of self-improvement.
So grab your headphones and get ready for a fantastic journey with us. Spiritual Sisters with Sass is here to uplift, inspire, and keep it real.
Thanks for tuning in, lovely listeners. Let's dive in.
Spirit and sass. Here we go.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Spiritual Sisters with Sass. This week, it is just me. Lynn said she's going to do her best to hop on when she gets a chance. Today, we are actually here with Logan Hufford. And Logan is going to talk to us about his addiction. So he's about to get real vulnerable. And because Lynn's not here, what a perfect conversation for us to be having. We're talking about addiction and the uncomfortableness of addiction. Logan is a dad and a husband. And what do you do for work? Tell us a little bit about yourself, Logan.
Yeah, so I do a couple things for work. I work for Veritas Wealth Management up here in Alaska, and I do actually I coach folks within the realm of finances and ultimately helping folks make healthier decisions. I always stress, like, my background is not in finance. My background is not in having a bunch of diplomas. It's in recovery. It's in helping folks work through unhealthy habits. And then I also run like the PR and social media and stuff for Veritas. But I mean, ultimately what I do is recovery. I mean, I don't make money from it. It's my passion, but it's my mission. What fills my cup is working with folks and to try to, be one of the hands reaching into the pit, to help folks, just like a lot of men did for me.
That's fantastic. Okay, let's just get straight into it. Can you
Yeah.
tell us about your story? Tell us how you ended up in this journey and in this journey of helping other people because of your own journey. Where did your journey start?
Yeah. I mean, my journey started, I don't like, without like going literally back to, me as a little kid. And basically I struggled with pornography addiction since I was a little kid. Compulsive masturbation since I was a young teenager. And it's pretty much siloed to those things for quite a while. But once I was an older teenager, young adult, that's when I started feeling like, I can talk to girls. I can try to seek attention from girls. And once I started to get that became, a much different, much stronger high than just pornography and masturbation. So now it's like, let me try to get attention from my peers, right? Let me try to get attention from girls. And so I planted those seeds, and I started chasing those hits and those dopamine hits. And I got married Yun. I met who would become my wife when I was 19 years old, and we got married when I was 20. She was 21, I was 20. We had our first boy 11 months later. And so, Yun dad, Yun husband. When I got married, though, I had already cheated on my wife multiple times, beyond pornography, but physically with other women. And I never thought that I would say those words. I never thought that would be the case for the first 18 years of my life, because I didn't see the seeds that I was planting and the seeds that I was watering and these roots that were growing. Mostly underground, is like chasing after the dopamine hits, chasing after the feeling that I got. But all of it was connected. The porn, the masturbation, the flirting, the seeking attention, and once I had more opportunity and once I crossed certain thresholds, then it was like a dam broke. Once I got to that point, it was when we were engaged. Several months before we got married was the first time I physically cheated on my wife with another woman, or again, at that point, his fiance. And once I did that, then it was that's when that dam broke. And I felt a ton of shame. I felt a ton of self-hatred. I felt a ton of nasty feelings and thoughts. It wasn't like I was just like living it up and loving life. But I absolutely, these two things were doing battle. Is like, I liked that attention. I liked those feelings. I also felt absolutely terrible. But up to that point, I still could tell myself this ridiculous lie that, well, once we get married, then I'll stop. It's like, I'll get these crazy things out now. Okay, I went way further than I ever thought I would, but at least I know once we get married, there's no way I would do that. And that's BS. That's not how addiction works. That's not how anything that's progressive and compulsive, works. And so it just went downhill, and it spiraled and just went worse and worse and worse for a lot of years. Yeah. Until, by God's grace, I eventually had, there was a beautiful, this is going to sound weird. There was this beautiful marriage of enough pain, enough brokenness, enough desperation that met with recovery opportunity, where I finally saw hope for the first time. And then not just those two things, but also, I'm jumping way ahead, but this is in 2015, my wife did something that she'd never done before. And she gave me an ultimatum. She finally said, okay, if you don't seek some serious help and make some serious change, then you're going to lose me and the boys. And at that point, we had 3 boys already. She's pregnant with our 4th boy. And, it wasn't like a toggle switch flipped and I just became a healthy person. But again, those 3 things were all happening. I was very desperate. I was very, very broken and very aware of that, and got that ultimatum. And then within the coming year, God put some people in my path and some program in my path that I did not fathom was possible.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. And yet everything that you're saying, I'm like, oh, yep, that's addiction. Yep, that's addiction.
Yeah.
But also what we seem to do, and one of the things that I really talk about a lot with anybody that I work with, you hear everybody say, oh, the problem is that they drink. No, the problem is that we have unhealed trauma that we are not dealing with. The problem is we don't want to feel. The solution is whatever we pick as our addiction. Yeah. And people will be like, oh, I don't have an addiction because I just drink on the weekends. Or it's just smoking. Or, like for you, the hardest addictions to stop are ones you have to continue to do. So sex, food, like these are things that you have to continue to do in order to live.
Right.
But now you have to have it under control.
And there's also a huge difference, and this is not only with sexual addiction, but it definitely is, if you're comparing sexual addiction to, maybe the more stereotypical addictions, alcoholism, drug addiction, that kind of thing, the physical evidence is so different. I always point out, like, so I could be actively stewing in my addiction, but I don't smell like alcohol. I don't have track marks on my arm. I don't, you're not going to see pill bottles laying around my bathroom, right? Like, so all these different things. Now, my wife, Carrie, obviously there were things that she could see, right? There were certain people close enough to me that there was still evidence that you could point to, but it wasn't the classic telltale signs that people think of when they think of addiction.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
sure.
so the idea of like a functioning addict, although I certainly did not feel like a functioning addict, the idea of a functioning addict was really at play, where, I'm going to work, I'm coming home, I'm, kissing my boys and tuck them in for bed. And, we're all going to go to church and I'm going to hold my wife's hand and we're going to take nice little Christmas photos. And, all of those things were at play, to where, if you look at a photo of me and my family from 10 years ago, and then you look at a family photo of us now, technically the only thing you might notice is, well, obviously I got a little less hair and my kids are all bigger, but what you're not seeing is 10 years ago, you're looking at a broken shell of a man, that hated his life, hated that his kids had him as their dad. But
Hated himself.
but you can't see that, right? You can't know that. There's no physical manifestation of that.
Yeah. And with a lot of people that I work with, they're functioning alcoholics. Right now, the majority of the people that I work with, Laser Quit, are people who are, they're high level executives. They're like, COVID has really made this a bigger thing. So with us, we see, like a mom who used to, drink a glass of wine a week and now drinks a bottle of wine a night and just can't stop. Those are the people that I'm working with more often than not. So now they're functioning alcoholics as well. So a lot of people don't know that these people drink at all. The closest to them see, when they get completely out of hand in the evening, but in their daily life, it's just not seen. They're not, like the side effects are not necessarily there. It's the same as smoking. Like a lot of people will be like, well, it's not affecting me. No, you just can't see how it's affecting you.
Right.
And yet for you, the difference could have been, here's 10 years ago with me and my family, and here's me by myself now. I don't have
100%.
it anymore because the consequences are the same. It's going to cost you your life, your family, and it could cost you your life in the sense that, you could end up with a disease that kills you.
Yep.
So addiction isn't based on the thing that you're choosing to cover up the addiction with. The addiction is actually the problem that we're having and the feelings we don't want to feel.
Right.
Right. And so that's the place that we need to heal.
Well, and that's on like a little bit more optimistic side. I mean, that's one of the beautiful things that I could not fathom about recovery and, life in sobriety now. But I try to emphasize, whether it's, stuff I'm doing on Instagram or an interview like this or just talking to folks about recovery, is in the same way that addiction is so much more than, oh, I choose to use this thing compulsively and it's hard to stop. Like that those are probably true statements and those are part of it, but addiction is so much more than that. In the same way, recovery is not, oh, I don't do that anymore. Recovery is not, I'm sober for this many days. Recovery is not, I used to be this way and now I'm this way. Like all of those statements hopefully are still true, right? Recovery is, now I can do life in a healthy way. And I am imperfect, but I'm authentic. I can look at my boys knowing that I am not a perfect dad, but I don't have shame. I don't have secrets. I don't have a hidden double life. Like, I mean, it is literally like I was going, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but like I was going through life for so many years, not just as a man, but as a dad, as a husband, like desperately wanting to be a good husband and a good dad. But it's like I'm dragging this dead corpse that is my life, that is my soul. And now life's not perfect and life's not easy, but it's a lot easier because I'm not dragging that dead corpse anymore. It's like I can be real. I can be authentic. And yeah, like we have issues and we have problems. And, there's times where I make unhealthy choices and I, okay, you know what? I made an unhealthy choice. I was short with my wife. I was short with my kids or whatever it looks like. But I don't have to live in that. I don't have to stew in that because I don't have this gigantic evil double life, this like dragon that I'm trying not to let anyone know about. I just work through problems one step at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I find it really interesting because even in, like I said, in the work that I do, a lot of people don't want to touch on what created this in the first place.
Mm,
And, where I was initially hurt to start this choice. And like for me, I was addicted to smoking. I don't really have the tendencies to be an addict, but also we all have those tendencies.
right.
So I have learned, especially over the last 10, 15 years, how to work through my shit, how to sit in my feelings. That one's been a really
Yeah.
new one over the last year of
Yeah.
just sitting with it because it's so uncomfortable. Having no vices because, before it would be like, well, I don't drink, but I smoke pot, but it's not that big of a deal. But it is a big deal because no matter what, if I'm trying to avoid the feeling that I'm having, and this is such a regular conversation, like someone will be like, oh, today just feels like a day I need to have a beer. And I'm like, the minute I say I need to,
Yep.
I need to not have that beer and sit with the shitty feeling that I'm having right now because that's exactly why I'm feeling that way.
100%.
So it just, for me, it's so interesting. Are you comfortable getting into like what initiated this for you? What your trauma was that started it? If not, totally fine. I know
So
that's pretty vulnerable.
I'm extremely comfortable. It's probably going to be really boring.
Okay.
I have the most boring origin story like of anybody that was an addict.
Okay. Will you
So
give it to us short? Let's do short form so that our listeners aren't going to be like, oh my God, I'm over it.
no, I
But
mean, basically, I'll just, yeah, I'll give you the cliff notes and you can expand it if you want. But so like I was raised in a household where I'm the baby of five. I was raised by both my parents. We weren't rich, we weren't spoiled, but we were taken care of. We were never lacking any necessities, and including within that, I never, and I almost never use the words always and never, but I'm going to use these words. I never felt like I wasn't loved. I
okay.
never felt like I was in danger in my home. Those are two statements that I 100% took for granted as a kid, but now in recovery, like hearing other people's stories, like I do not take those statements for granted, but those are true statements. I
But
felt,
those can also create their own issue. Like we've done a lot of Tony Robbins stuff, and I did a course with Tony, and one of his courses actually said, like, he sat down with this woman, and he said, she said, like, I just can't seem to find the right guy. Like, yeah, I'm with this guy that's with me here, and we're trying to work through it, but. And so then Tony got into it and was like, what was your dad like? And she starts talking about how perfect her childhood was and how perfect and amazing her dad was. And he said, that's the problem. And she was like, excuse you. And she said, she was like, she was mad about it. And he said, well, if you
yeah,
think about it, now no one's ever going to measure up to your dad because he was such an amazing man.
yeah,
Right. So it can also create its own problem. So you felt loved
yeah.
and you never felt unsafe.
Right. So it's like, I definitely, there's no perfect family, no perfect childhood, but overall, I had a really, really good childhood, a strong foundation in a lot of ways. And there were definitely there were some things missing, and this isn't me like pointing fingers, calling stuff out, but again, there's no perfect anything on earth, right? So, a couple things that were missing were I I very few times do I ever remember my parents being vulnerable at all with us.
Yeah.
And so like I'm 34, but I'm not only am I the baby of five, my parents got started late. So like my parents, they were raised by Depression era, World War II veteran. So like my parents were not super into, and again, it wasn't like they were like mean, but they were not super
But you weren't
into being vulnerable and talking about their feelings, right? So like that was not something that we got. My dad would tell us stories and stuff about like his childhood, but it was he was telling stories. He wasn't being vulnerable and sharing like mistakes that he made and lessons learned and stuff like that. And my mom really pretty much the same thing, except even less talking about her past. And so, and we've had conversations since then, in the last several years where I've been open about like, I wish you would have shared, stuff where you screwed up, right? Stuff that you regretted or whatever. So like I don't hold that against them at all, but it's just, it's just something I can point out and go, okay, like that's a thing, right? That wasn't there. The other piece, and I, as a kid, I don't know that how much this affected me and my decision making or anything, but I would very much have always been aware of it. My parents, Like they're really good parents, not good spouses.
Mm.
They did not pour into their marriage. And I, again, almost never saw reconciliation from them. You know, owning their stuff, apologizing. Obviously, it's not to say they never did that behind closed doors, but I'll tell you this right now. One thing that me and my wife carry, something that we kind of live by is we reconcile. We don't make a show of it, but we reconcile a lot in front of the kids. We want our kids to see consistently what it looks like to own your crap, apologize, be real with loved ones or anyone, right? And so like those are just, there's two things that I didn't really see was vulnerability, reconciliation.
So the coach in me likes to like dig into this a little bit. So for me, when I see these, I'm getting this like intuitive hit of, like at home, sure you were loved and sure there was all the things. And then you get to school and you're not getting the same type of attention that you got at home. So now you start looking for that attention elsewhere because one of the
Right.
things, especially when we're not taught how to feel our feelings, we're definitely not taught how to fulfill ourselves.
Right.
Now we're always looking for that outside of ourselves. So now I need like, and this is a real problem with a lot of women, and women will not acknowledge it. My best friend is she was an alcoholic. And one of her biggest problems is she has a relationship. She's been with the guy for 8 years. They're engaged. But she still was seeking that outside validation. And then she would point fingers at her spouse and be like, "You're the reason that I don't feel loved." And I kept saying to her, he's not the reason for anything that's happening inside of you.
Yeah.
You're the reason for everything happening inside of you. You looking for validation outside. He could be telling you every single day, all day long, how incredible you are, how beautiful you are, how fit you are. He could tell you everything, and you're still going to be looking for that outside of yourself because you need to fulfill it within yourself. So she would seek it outside of herself. She would, go to the gym and like, put an extra show on, and maybe, she sees somebody looking at her. So she like sticks her butt out extra and, has some sass, looking for that external validation from people who are what? Excuse my language, but gonna fuck you and dump you. They
Right.
don't want an 8-year relationship with you. They don't want to raise your kids with you. They don't want to take care of you like the one that you've got. You need to take care of whatever's going on inside of you to validate you first. And
Right.
over the last 2 years, this has been a journey she's been on. And actually, yesterday, we were having a FaceTime call, and she said, "Oh my God, I have to tell you." And I was like, "What?" She said, "I can't believe how much I don't care." And I was like, "About what?" And she's like, "Other people's opinions at all."
Yeah.
She's like, "I don't need validation from men, women. I don't need your validation even." She's like, "I know I'm doing the best that I can do. And that's all that matters. And
Yeah.
every day I work on being a better person." And so I totally understand that, like seeking validation, because we all do it. It's just
Right.
that how we get that validation is different for most of us. Like I know a ton of men, they we'll call them hoary. They go out and they sleep around and they cheat on their wives and they do all these things, but they're looking for that validation. It's not about, the fact that they don't love their wives,
Right.
but they also don't put in that same context of like how much I'm hurting the person that I say I love.
100%.
So for me, we're going to take this a little bit on a little bit of like a side path here. One of the things, I've had multiple conversations with men about cheating, and I fortunately have not cheated on a spouse. I think I got cheated on young enough that and then watching things in my family and all the
Yeah.
things, I was like, I'm never going to hurt somebody in that way. That being
Right.
said, I didn't hurt them in that way, but I'm sure I hurt them in other ways.
Yeah.
What happens in a relationship or in a moment like this, and this is for our listeners as well, is what happens for you to be able to like kind of put the person you love the most to the side to get this validation?
Yeah. Because what you described earlier, as far as like seeking validation, even though it has nothing, I mean, I'm not at all going to get so many things that I'm currently getting from my spouse or my partner.
Yes.
That's absolutely me. And that's the way that I operated for so many years. Because there's never been a day in my life since I've known Carrie. We've been together for 15 years now, and married since June 4th, 2011. she's always been drop dead gorgeous. She's always done what she can to be, the best fiance, or the best girlfriend, the best fiance, the best wife, best mom, like all these things. And yet, yeah, I cheated on her many times over, and it had nothing to do with her, had nothing to do with her not being sexually available or being sexy enough or anything like that. And I realize that's not everyone's story. Sometimes somebody may cheat because they feel like they're not getting something or whatever, but that was not my story. It had nothing to do with Carrie.
I feel like with that pause, I just got to say, I feel like it never has anything to do with the spouse, because if you're not getting what you need, you also then need to own that you're not getting what you need and speak to your spouse about it and say, I'm not getting what I need. And this is what the thoughts and feelings I'm getting. This is a conscious relationship.
Right.
I can go out and cheat on you and you never know. Yeah, I've said to you, I want sex and I'm not getting it, but there's more here. And if a woman isn't having sex, that means they're not connected to you.
Right.
Right. So for
No,
you,
for sure. There's going to be a lot of layers.
Yes. Right. Like
Yeah.
dig into that. What's actually happening? Have a conversation. Hey, this is the way I'm feeling. I watched a thing, Sad Guru. Have you heard of him?
Mm-mm.
He is this amazing man and he gives the most amazing advice. And I actually watched a reel yesterday and he said, basically, when you love someone, it's not asking someone to behave the way you want them to. It's asking them to be themselves.
Hmm.
And so for me, I found it so interesting because it's so true. It's the same as Buddha says, if you love a flower, you don't pick it, you water it. We go into all of these relationships and then we start wanting to change people or tell them how to act or have them behave a way that works for me. But instead, what if I actually was able to communicate clearly and say, like, this is what I'm not getting. And I actually am starting to feel like I want to go cheat on you. I'm not saying that to hurt you. I'm saying that because this is the direction my head goes when I'm in this place.
Mm-hmm.
Means to me, we have something to work on. Can we get counseling? Can we do this? Can we do that? Those types of things. But that is also a me thing. That's not someone making me feel anything, because nobody makes me feel anything, right? It's me. And so that's where you were saying it wasn't about my wife. It was about myself.
Yeah. And of course, what you're describing is also like it's all accurate, and yet you're also describing some pretty high level self-reflection and self-awareness, right? That just a lot of humans don't have, and I certainly did not have. And I'm that's reason number 1,000,063 that I'm thankful for recovery, because like in addition to all the reasons I got into recovery, some of those tools are like the ability to analyze myself and analyze my needs and analyze my emotions on this. But so to go back to your question, I mean, you asked about like, what was that like to have, as my description, right? This gorgeous wife who's doing everything she can to be the best wife possible. And for me to cheat on her, for me to chase after these other things, pornography, other women, whether it's over texting, physically, an emotional relationship, physical, all the above, because I literally, it encompassed all these things. I mean, it was, to put it very simply, it was compartmentalization on steroids. I mean, it's siloing on steroids. I mean, the first time that I think I started to live in shame was, to be honest, it wasn't even the first time that I cheated on her, but I think this was the first time that I really started to live in shame. And this was just a couple months. It was springtime, so it would have been just a couple months before we got married. And so we didn't live together. And my fiance Carrie is texting me about how she was a new Christian. I was raised in the church. She was a new Christian, and she was at our church, like helping out put together this little spring ladies tea thing. And she's like texting me, and she's all excited. And this Saturday morning, and I'm getting these texts from her, and I'm laying in bed. I had been with this other woman, and could not just get those texts away from me fast enough, right? Could not. There was nothing I could do to try to get away from that fast enough, in terms of you talk about feeling feelings, right? And that went on to just become part of my MO, to just compartmentalize the heck out of things. I remember a time on a different level, because for me personally, and this is not me trying to preach at anyone, but absolutely being real with how stuff works. I do not minimize pornography at all. If I am, secretly chasing after women, whether they're on screen or over text or physically, like ultimately I'm secretly chasing after other women who are not my wife. And so, pornography was a big deal for me for a lot of years. I remember a night where I was coming home from work and I started to feel urges, and I pulled off in a parking lot, and I'm looking at pornography. And so like I've got my phone and watching this, and this is several years into marriage. And so by this time I'd already cheated on Carrie multiple times. She knew the stuff that I'd done, and there had already been so much brokenness and also a lot of numbness on her part, right?
Yeah.
Just survival mode. And she started texting me. She's like, hey, like, normally you're home around this time, or what's going on? Are you okay? And like swipe it away, put it, swipe it to the top of the screen to get the text off the screen. Right. And then she hits me with more text, and she's like, are you with a woman? Are you looking at porn? Like, what's going on? And I that's one of the most vivid memories I have of me acting out in my addiction, where this woman who has given me everything, who's given our kids everything, who has done everything humanly possible to be the sexiest, most available, most loving, most gracious, most patient woman, mom, wife, all these things. And I'm just like, screw you, get out of here. I got my porn here. There's no logic in that scenario. There is no planning in that scenario. There's no prefrontal cortex going on in that scenario, right? That is me going, no, I'm tunnel vision. I'm chasing after this thing, limbic system, chasing after this high, chasing after this hit. And yet I did that all the time. Usually, this wasn't always the case, but this was usually the case when I would start to go down a path, whether it's, I'm looking at maybe Google images or YouTube videos of, like, I'm not all the way to looking at porn or having an affair, but like I'm starting to look at stuff that I shouldn't be looking at, or I'm starting to text somebody and it's like, I'm going places I shouldn't go. But from my perspective now, I would say, but I can still return. Like I can still come back from this place. But in that moment, in my addiction, I felt like once I started, I could not return. And this gets back to that point that I made a couple minutes ago of like, of course I still make unhealthy choices. I still do the wrong thing, but now I can make a wrong choice and realize, oh shoot, I said something rude to Carrie. That doesn't mean I have to then take it all the way and be a jerk and yell and punch a hole through the drywall and yell at my kids. But that's what I used to do. Once I started, once this little germ was growing, I felt like I automatically just had to let the whole thing take its course, run its course. And like, that's so crazy if I'm healthy and I'm objective and I can look at, but in addiction, that was how I lived life.
Yeah.
I was in this self-driving car and I can't stop and I can't get off the highway. And it's like, no, there's off ramps always. And it's not a self-driving car. I'm driving it, but I didn't realize that.
I have a question. It's a personal question, and of course you can tell me it's not my business. One common denominator I find in a lot of addiction is ADD, ADHD. Is this something that you have been diagnosed with?
It's not. I have been asked that question, but I've not been diagnosed with that.
Okay. I find just because, and it's actually, Gabor Mate has been talking about it a lot recently. And I was like, oh my God, this is something I work with someone and her dad is a scientist and her dad works with the brain. He's a neuroscientist. And he had said like the new job you're working at with Laser Quit, like, I want to know more about it. So I actually sent him a text message and gave him some information. And he was like, my doctor sat my son down, I want to say now 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, and said to my son, like my son had been in school and he had been taking his friend's ADD meds to get high. But instead, he'd be like, I'm going to go to school. So they'd be skipping. He'd take the pill and he'd be like, I'm going to go to school. I'm bored. You guys suck. And so what it did was it was regulating him. If
Yeah.
he took an ADHD med, he'd get depressed. So my son came home and was like, hey, so I just want to tell you something. And he ended up telling me that he had been doing this thing. And I was like, hey, we're going to call the doctor. We're going to make an appointment and we're going to get you your own meds. So you're not taking people's meds that are going to mess you up. And
Right.
so we called the doctor. He went in and saw the doctor, and the doctor sat him down, and he had told me, like, Mom, these are the drugs I've done. These are the things I've done. And I was just like, you've done more drugs than I have, kid. And so we went in and we were talking to the doctor, and my doctor says to him, I just want you to know that, like, some of your behaviors you've had through the years, because I think he was like 14 or 15 when he was diagnosed finally with ADHD or ADD, sorry. And in it, he said to my son, I just want you to know it's normal that some of these behaviors have happened. And now I have a question for you. And my son's like, okay. And he said, how many drugs have you done? And my son was like, just smoked pot, and kind of gave like the side eye and was looking at me. And I was like, if there's one person that you do not lie to, it is your doctor,
Yeah.
because he may need to save your life. So you tell him the truth. And so he was like, okay, I've done cocaine. I've done a bit of cocaine. He's like, I've done meth. I've done marijuana. I've done this. And he's just going off. And I knew about it. So the doctor kind of looked at me and I was like, he did tell me the truth about all of these things. And he walked over to my son and he put his hand on his shoulder and he said, I just want you to know this is not your fault. And I was like, what? And he said, people with ADHD or ADD lack dopamine. And when you do cocaine, you get to a normal place. So he looked at me and he said, Meredith, have you ever done cocaine? And I was like, I actually haven't. So I don't know what it's like. And he said, somebody who does cocaine gets like wound up and they're super like tight in their body and they're just like, oh, and I'm the best. And all this dopamine is releasing. He said, if you imagine being on cocaine every day with that heightened nervous system, he said,
Yeah.
that's what your son feels like without medications every single day. And I was like, what? And he's like, so when he does cocaine, he feels like you feel. And I was just like, wait, what? And he's like, when he takes a stimulant, it calms him down. So he takes the stimulant and so when he does cocaine, he feels the way that you feel every day. If you did cocaine, you'd feel like he feels every day. And I was like, oh my goodness. So the
Wow.
dopamine levels that happen or that are lacking in their brain, they actually use because it makes them feel normal. So to not have 50,000, like we have 60,000 thoughts that go through our brain in a day, but someone with ADD or ADHD will have like 50 or 1,000 in an hour, right? So they'll
Wow.
have an excessive amount of thoughts go through their brain. Dopamine slows that, calms you down, makes you feel good, all of those things. So what Gabor Mate has started to say is that he's seeing that ADD and ADHD are one of the core reasons that addiction is happening. They're all undiagnosed. And it was interesting because prior to that, my doctor had told me that. And so, and then working with this woman shortly after,
Yeah.
this woman's dad was a neuroscientist and he said the same thing. And he was just like, I just want you to know that, like, you releasing all this dopamine is actually helping people. You should really start trying to help people with ADHD and ADD. And so I really did. My son notices a massive change when he has his treatments. But he also has learned how to cope with himself. So he's not
Right.
on meds anymore, but he has learned how to manage his ADD without using stimulants. My son does not do drugs. He does not drink. He won't even smoke a doobie. Like, he is super, and he's almost 23 years old. So, like,
Yeah.
he's in that age where all his friends are doing it. And he actually came home not that long ago and said, like, I just feel like I'm in a place where maybe I'm outgrowing my friends.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's a normal thing. And I know it's uncomfortable, but this is where you have to sit with it, because his addiction is gaming.
Yeah.
His addiction is to go escape in the game where, no reality can even interfere with him. So it's just such an interesting thing because we're all looking for that dopamine rush,
Yep.
right? Whether it's using your phone, gambling, porn, alcohol, drugs, whatever it is that we're using, we're really using that to cover up the real problem.
Yeah.
And so now my question comes to you is, what have you healed so that you're able to, because I love recovery. That's the thing I find about recovery and people who are in recovery is that they're doing a lot more of the work. I call it the work on themselves
Right.
because they're conscious, they're aware, they use their brain and they analyze themselves and they don't point fingers as much take a lot more responsibility for themselves because they're able to go through recovery. So tell me a little bit about your recovery journey, because you said there were so many men who reached out and helped you heal through
Yeah.
this. So tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, my recovery journey from like a tangible perspective, I mean, it started true, true healthy recovery for me started in May of 2016. Like I first attended a meeting summer of 2015, attended a couple different meetings. I did some stuff, I checked some boxes. I did some bare minimum stuff to kind of like reach out, but started getting active traction in recovery, started getting sobriety. And ultimately I was mentored in basically a voluntary house arrest program for 2 years, where my mentor, Rick, he personally, was my mentor, my sponsor, and then a group of men, um, other guys who had, specifically within the realm of sexual addiction, which is like that boggled my mind. I never thought that was possible. That there would be, especially here in Alaska, like
Yeah.
there's less than 500,000 people in the entire state. The idea that there would be a dozen guys who not only shared my struggle, but had actually experienced healthy living and transformative healing, years of transformative healing. And most of these guys, not all, but most of them had restored marriages. Like I did not think that that could be possible. I mean, you asked like, what, what did I heal from? And there, in a sense, compared to maybe some folks, I'm not necessarily going to have like I can point to this, like there was this father wound, there was this trauma, there wasn't like something specific like that, but healing from a lot of self-inflicted trauma, that I have done too much. I have committed too many atrocities. There is no hope for me.
Yeah.
Another vivid memory I have, and this is not a one-time thing, this was just something that I just sat in. This was a mindset I had. Hope for me would have been, I hope that I can stop cheating on my wife, or at least cheat less. That's such a crappy statement of hope, but that's what hope was. A second level of hope would have been, I hope that I can not have physical affairs and then maybe only look at porn, so here and there. Again, really crappy version of hope, but that's what hope was. And then eventually it got to where I was like, okay, I got some hope. I think I can maybe get sober. I think I can stop doing this. But even then, like the idea that I could live life not existing but thriving,
Yeah.
that I could be a dad who wasn't just in their lives in spite of my deficiencies, but that I could love and train and mentor my boys because of my recovery, because of mistakes that I'd made, because of trauma that I'd caused to their mom, that she has experienced her own healing from for the last 8.5 years. Like, that's true hope. That's real hope, right?
Yeah.
That no, like God has given me these incredible blessings. It's not about I survived, like our marriage survived. I reject the idea that we're still together. No, it's not that we're still together. It's we each individually, for different reasons, Carrie and I each got into recovery and have submitted ourselves to other people and other people's ideas and programs, and experienced a ton of healing. And we're not just still together. We have we never got divorced and remarried, but like we have a new, very different marriage, a very different relationship than we'd ever have before. Our family is now, there's like bedrock foundations that our family is built on. That's not just stuff that we read in a parenting book, not stuff that we learned from a marriage retreat one weekend. It's like, no, this is what we've lived in. And, this is what, God and a lot of healthy people have brought us through, is how to live life in a healthy way. And as I've said before, not perfectly, but authentically.
Yeah. I love this. I love this. Okay. So to close this out, I have two things. I would like for
Yeah.
you to give us one statement or quote that you would like to share with people who are in recovery or who are debating recovery and feel like you felt where, you know, the hope that you had was pretty sad.
Yeah.
It was still hope. What is one statement or quote or piece of information that you would like to share with those people?
I'm going to cheat and give you two, but they're connected.
Yeah.
And I didn't come up with either one, but you know, there's the common phrase one day at a time in recovery, and got no problem with that. I hold that dear. But of course, beyond that is I don't just need to make sure I get through today. Sometimes I need to get through this very moment, right? I need to, like, I don't need to worry about going to bed sober. I need to make sure that I get through the next 30 seconds without acting out, without doing something stupid that's going to wreck my life.
Yes.
So really taking ownership of, it's not just one day at a time. Sometimes it's one moment at a time. And generally speaking, I can have struggles even several years into recovery and sobriety, but generally speaking, that's more for somebody who, you know, early on in recovery, right? Just trying to get some traction, you know, so the person that's not even sober yet, right? But then on the other end, and this is really just for anyone that is in recovery, I get asked the question a lot, like, hey, especially guys locally up here, because like the group that I now lead, it's a local group only. It's and then there's there's mentorship opportunities within that. And so, you know, guys have walked through that voluntary house arrest program just like I did. And I've gotten asked the question a lot, like, hey, do I need to go through that 2-year program? I mean, sometimes it's 3 years. Do I need to go through that program to like get sober? And my answer is usually probably not. You might not need to go through that program to get sober. But I don't want you to just get sober. Like, if you want true transformative healing, that's going to take a lot more than just not doing the wrong thing. Because as we've talked about, like recovery, and it's not the only program that exists, but it's the one I know of, at least in Alaska, that deals with sexual addiction specifically. You know, that program is so dynamic and it's so deep and it's rigid and it's hardcore. It's not easy, but it goes into all these levels of my life and my routines and my mindset and how I cope with life. That, you know, could somebody get sober just by white knuckling it? Yeah. I don't want to be a dry drunk, right? I don't want to be somebody that's just not doing the thing. I want to be somebody who can be healthy and, you know, holistically approach life. And so that was really wordy. I guess I'll sum it up with this. Sobriety is a really crappy finish line. Sobriety is a tool that I can use to live life in a healthy way, but sobriety by itself is not the finish line.
I love that. And I love, like you said, like I could dry drunk, and I actually have like even made posts about this and stuff like that, because dry drunking is a real thing.
Yeah.
Where no, I'm not using my substance anymore, but I'm still acting in all the ways that I did before.
Yeah.
That's dry drunking. You are not sober at that point. You may be sober from your substance, but you are still acting and doing the things that you were doing previously, and therefore to me are not staying sober.
Yeah.
So I love this. And then I guess the only other question for me is, what is one piece of advice that you would give to someone who is where you were, where you're struggling and you just don't know that there's even hope, that you don't believe that there's hope, that life just feels like I'm at my wit's end anyways, and there's nowhere up from here, so I may as well just keep going down?
Yeah. I'm going to do something that I don't do a whole lot of, which is give a promise. But I promise you that no matter how far you have taken your addiction, no matter what kind of harms you have caused, no matter what kind of trauma you have personally suffered from or inflicted on others or both, there is healing possible. Now, that I'm not pretending that human consequences aren't real, right? Natural consequences are real. Like you alluded to, there's a different version where I go through my program and I go through my life, and yet I'm sitting here and I go home to an empty house, right? And by my choices, I deserve that. But healing is possible because healing takes place inside myself. I'm so thankful that in addition to that internal healing, I get to go home to my wife, that I get to go home and be a dad to my boys. I'm so thankful for that. But I recognize that even outside of that, healing was still something that was happening inside of me. And I've personally seen so many folks, especially within the sexual addiction realm, but folks on all ends of the spectrum. There are countless people, as you've seen too, right? There's countless people that talk about rock bottom. I mean, people that got to places in their life where it's like there's no logical way that this person should be alive, let alone thriving, let alone loving others and making a positive impact in the world, and raising a family or whatever it is that they're doing. And the thing that will keep me down, there's two lies that will keep me down, and I shouldn't be able to believe both of them, but sometimes I can, because addiction's goofy like that. I can believe one lie that says, well, at least I'm not as bad as so and so. Simultaneously, I can believe a second lie, which is, no one has done the evil crap that I've done. Nobody's gone as far as I have. Like, those two things shouldn't exist, and yet I've believed both lies simultaneously.
Yeah. Yes. I love that. Okay, well, thank you so much, Logan, for joining us today. It was great to have you. Thank you for your vulnerability and your honesty. I know it can be really difficult to own our shit, and yet you are doing it like a champ. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate you. So thank you so much for being on here with us. And make sure you guys join us in about 2 weeks for our next episode. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you for joining us on this spirited journey today.
We hope you enjoyed diving into the world of self-improvement with us. Two sisters who found their own unique paths.
Remember, life is a tapestry of experiences, and it's how we embrace them that makes all the difference.
So whether you're on your yoga mat, exploring mindfulness, or simply navigating life's twists and turns, always keep that spirit and sass alive.
We are Colin and Nerdy Locked Up, and we're here to remind you that happiness and abundance are within reach.
Stay connected with us on social media and keep those questions and stories coming. We love hearing from you.
Until next time, beautiful souls, keep doing the work, keep sharing your experiences, and keep living a life that's authentically you.
And never forget to add a little extra sass to your day.
Spirit and sass, always.